Hey everyone, I am Rambo with the Mule Deer Foundation, and this is the Mule Deer Foundation Podcast. This episode, we're talking about where mule deer numbers are failing. And today with me, I have two esteemed guests. On my right here is Ron Spomer. Ron, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you. I am up in Idaho, southeast Idaho, good mule deer country. I've had a career since the 1970s as a wildlife and hunting writer for the magazines, and then I transitioned into some television programming back in the early part of the 21st century. Believe it or not, we're in the 21st century. And these days, my wife and I have YouTube channel
Mm-hmm.
and a podcast and do a lot of social media stuff because that's kind of how you reach your audience
Yeah.
these days.
Spomer Outdoors is where people can find you. Right?
Yes, Ron Spomer Outdoors.
Okay. And then to my left is my esteemed colleague here, Frank Gaither. Frank, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Frank Gaither. Thanks again, Ashley, Ron, for joining. Definitely a pleasure to be here. My name is Frank Gaither. I'm your regional director for the Mule Deer Foundation and the Black-tailed Deer Foundation in California and Northwest Nevada. I've been with the Mule Deer Foundation for the last 2 years. I've been hunting and fishing since I was a young kid. Enjoy the great outdoors. Look forward to taking my family out and enjoying that, that camaraderie. Like the
Absolutely.
real core value there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for joining us. So, we've been talking a bit about mule deer numbers as a whole in decline, but this is a little bit more on a state by state basis. So, I'd love to get into what you're seeing in your state as far as mule deer numbers declining, and then we can go into some of the reasons why those numbers may or may not be declining.
Yeah, we've got a little ranch, so we're kind of on the ground, and we haven't really noticed our local herd declining significantly. We've always have roughly the same number. Nothing seems to get very old as far as bucks. You look at a big buck, you figure, well, that guy's hitting 5 years old, 7. It's nice to see age class distribution, but we're seeing mostly 2-year-old young bucks, and then they seem to sort of disappear for some
Right.
strange reason. But what really alarms me is regionally, as I travel, I don't see as many deer in the fields and such that you'd expect, especially in winter habitat.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got I-15 running down through there, but I do see quite a few dead deer on that highway.
Right.
So in the last 5, 6 years, that's really started to alarm me in all of the highway deaths.
Right.
I have seen some fencing going up along there on the Utah side,
Mm-hmm.
not much on the Idaho side. So I think one of the contributors to the decline is that constant highway just
Right.
nibbling away at that herd. I mean, every time you lose a pregnant doe in February or March, there go 2 or 3 more deer for the year.
Right.
So it's something I think we need to address with overpasses, perhaps. I understand the fencing keeps them off the highway, but then it also keeps them from getting off the winter mountains down
Right.
into the valleys where they would normally winter. So you've got issues then with feeding.
Right.
So pretty concerning.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something we do here at Mule Deer Foundation is being very habitat focused as far as fencing goes and sage step and creating that diverse habitat. But corridors are very impactful. They are just very time consuming and very expensive. So
Yeah.
we did fund one recently in Colorado. I think there's another one we're starting to work on with some partners out of Wyoming because they are one of the best ways to, like you said, help mule deer not get hit by cars, but then still help them with those migration patterns and keeping up with those corridors. Frank, what are you seeing in California as far as population decline and or thriving?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, going off of Ron's point, we're finding that, it's a predator issue. I mean, in California, and it's no surprise. And we need to do a better job as a whole, as hunting enthusiasts and hunters, people that enjoy just being on the landscape. We want to make sure that, the people that go out, they feel comfortable. They feel comfortable. When I'm traveling the highway, like you said, because I travel a lot of miles, I got a lot of banquets and stuff like that. You used to be able to see deer just out in fields grazing with cattle or stuff like that. That's kind of few and far between. With the predators being so high, the deer, they're timbered up. You know what I mean? And like when we talk about migration and how important those corridors are, and we talk about shed hunting. That's something that we're coming into.
Right.
And I don't mean to go too in depth with it, but there's a lot of people that enjoy get out in the field
Right.
that like to do that. But it's so important to the mule deer and their migration corridor that we do our best to try to stay out of that
Right.
to
Right.
try to stay out of the field. I know we want to kind of get ahead of the season, get prepared for that next season so we can have the most success we possibly can.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we cannot disturb what
Absolutely.
they know.
Yeah.
So,
So
When you talk about predators, what are the key ones coming out of California or Nevada for that matter?
well, California, I mean, the big thing with us, I mean, we've always had a cat problem. We have a bear problem. So California Department of Fish and Wildlife, they stated in our last big game retreat meeting, the commission had said that roughly there's about 80,000 bears on the landscape, and that's a lot of bears.
Mm-hmm.
California does not have a spring black bear
I was getting
season.
ready to ask if that was
And
yeah.
I'm hoping that that's something that we can look into in the future. We
Mm-hmm.
stopped running hounds, so that was a huge thing. Nevada, we're starting to see, we can manage the cats in Nevada because we can hunt them. Because if you don't shoot your deer and you want to shoot a mountain lion, you can tag that mountain lion with that deer tag. So that's great. It's great for conservation. Another big issue that's arising in California for us is the wolf issue. Not to get into in depth, I understand. They're not native to our state, but like I said, they're allowed to be out on that landscape.
Right.
I mean, to be completely honest, I mean that's their world.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if we don't manage it, we won't have deer herds in the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
and then you probably won't have wolves anymore either.
Yeah,
They've got to have a
Yeah, because that's
forage
their
base.
right, right.
definitely.
Yeah, that's problematic. Idaho, of course, has long had good cougar numbers. When
Hmm.
go back to the '60s, when they started doing some backcountry studies and collaring the first ones and all, we're sort of the seminal state for that research. And we've maintained strong populations all along. But then they reintroduced wolves in Idaho and had a similar situation. How much effect that is having, I don't know. But when you add that up to the burgeoning human population,
Mm-hmm.
increased highway traffic, more highways, more suburbs spreading out, it just becomes limited habitat issue.
Yeah.
So on your ranch in Idaho, do you have much of a predator problem just with the herds that you're seeing?
Yeah, I've seen in our last 7 years 3 cougar kills
Mm-hmm.
winter on our little herd of mule deer, and we will see cougar. Well, we've seen 2, but tracks every winter. But it's never an issue where we think, oh my gosh, we're overrun with them.
Right.
But we have a lot of hunters in the area, a lot of hounds. Guys are running them from one mountain range to another and across the valleys and all. It's still pretty rural where we are. So I think they're doing a pretty fair job of balancing things out there. We don't have much, if any, black bear. I've seen one now in 7 years. So don't have that problem. Northern Idaho, several years ago, the last study I saw for the major predator on fawns and elk calves especially was
Hmm.
the black bear of
Right.
all things. Everybody always thinks they're just out eating berries.
Right.
Well, not in June.
Yep, yep. Especially when they just dropped and they're
Yes.
vulnerable and absolutely.
Such good noses, they can sniff them out.
Absolutely.
100%. And you talked about deer crossings. That's a big thing that's coming up in Southern California for us. As we get down into those southern regions, into our Goodale area and stuff like that. And what we're trying to do is work with our local state and government agencies, Caltrans, to be able to maybe be able to fund an overcrossing,
Mm-hmm.
because we are doing fencing projects. Actually, Zach Kraft,
Mm-hmm.
one of our conservation members, lives in Alturas, California.
Mm-hmm.
He
Shout out to Zach.
yeah, shout out to Zach. You've been doing a great job, buddy. He was actually able to get a grant. We were able to get $50,000 worth of chapter awards that we
Okay.
raised at our local banquets, and we were able to leverage that. We were actually able to get about a $3.5 million grant. We're going to be able to remove about, I think, Randy Morrison, our conservation manager in our state. He was like, you know what, this is going to be a great thing. This is going to be a great volunteer project.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We want to ensure, because as me as an RD, like we want to get people involved.
Right.
We want to have people have their voice. And a lot of people, they don't feel like their voice is being heard. Here at the Mule Deer Foundation, we want to hear your concerns. We want to be your voice, because at the end of the day, you're investing in us and we need to invest in you. Because at the end of the day, we need to come together as one and find that moral ground and figure out what it is that we need to accomplish as one if we want to be able to hunt. And what I tell people all the time, the people that come to our banquets, they're not always people that hunt and fish.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're
Right.
just people that enjoy the landscape. So, I mean, we do a lot of great things here at the Mule Deer Foundation. And I think that we are making some really, really big strides. I mean, especially in California. Last year, we were able to put $4.9 million on the ground. Roughly 43,368 acres were
Wow.
impacted. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
So like for us, like we're doing a lot of habitat and conservation work, but this year we're really going to take a focus on getting more volunteer projects
Yeah.
so we can get the people that are part of our chapters, get them more involved, teach, and because that's what this job is. I mean, as the Mule Deer Foundation, we need to educate.
Right.
We need to educate the people that don't know, you know, California Department of Fish and Wildlife just reported yesterday that we roughly have 4,000 cats in the state of California. How they came up with that subjective number, that's a huge number. But you think about a cat kills a fawn, how many fawns a month?
Right.
You times that, that's a huge impact. I mean, and when you think about mule deer in our state, I mean, our mule deer is going to be, according to biologists, they're going to say it's going to be east of I-5 and that eastern region of our state. I would say we probably have more blacktail than we do mule deer, which is
Mhm.
really beneficial because now that we have the Blacktail Deer Foundation, we're able to expand that and learn more about the blacktail and their habitat and how we can help them.
Right.
So, like I said, we have a lot of challenges, but I think the more that we get the people involved,
Absolutely.
that we can go out and we can make that impact with those plantings, with those, maybe a fence removal, maybe we're putting in a guzzler.
Yeah.
I strongly suggest to each and every member out there, if you're not a member, please feel free to reach out to your local agency, reach out to your local director, find out how you can get involved today.
Yeah.
Figure out how we can make you part of our mission and have you take that ownership and be part
And
of one.
I do think when you volunteer and you're in the field and part of a project, there's so much more of an investment toward the voice collectively gets louder because
Mhm.
people have more of an investment in seeing and being educated, whether
Mhm.
it's with our staff or other volunteers. And it really just amplifies that voice for conservation the more we can get people in the field to see what it is we're doing. Because not everyone, like you said, not everyone understands what we do or even quite understands there's levels to conservation, and understanding those levels really helps them feel more invested in it.
Where is the easiest place for folks to go to find out more about the Mule Deer Foundation and maybe find a local chapter? Like we have one close to where we live,
Yeah.
but a lot of folks probably have no clue. Where do I go to find the Mule Deer Foundation?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a great man. You would have thought we scripted this. That was
Yeah,
beautiful.
that was very good, Ron.
If you go to Mule Deer, www.muledeer.org, and then there is a how to get involved or chapters section, and there's actually a map, so you can click on. There's a map of the United States. You click on your state, and that will show your regional director for that region, and also events going on and chapters that are associated with that. And the regional director's information is listed, so you can reach out to them directly and get more involved that way.
Yeah.
Going back to our conversation, we've touched on predators. I wanted to kind of explore some other things that could be contributing to decline, like perhaps I know CWD is something that California has seen a little bit of. Is it prevalent or is it?
It's getting more prevalent in Southern California.
Yeah.
They're finding out that they're getting more and more cases that are coming up year after year after year. And I think it's so important that's why it's so important to report.
Right.
If we're not reporting, how are we going to make that difference? How are we going to
Right.
clean up this, this disease in this area? How are we going to maintain it? And we can't just keep moving deer around.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we don't do that too much. We don't do too many collarings in California, to be completely honest with you. Probably like they do in Idaho,
Or
Utah,
yeah.
Nevada. I mean, there's a lot of, other states that do, and we do a lot of great work out there, in that matter. But, I think our biggest thing is we need to clean up our forest, which we are doing,
Mhm.
okay? Because the biggest thing in California, you want to know what kills more fawns than anything? Fire.
Right.
And we have fire galore
Absolutely.
in the state of California. I mean, when we have not wet winters,
It's a
and
guaranteed hot summer.
yeah, but you get those wet winters, and maybe you get that kind of weird season where it's a hot summer and it was still rainy, and you're like, well, what's going on?
Right.
What's happening here? Um, all that growth from that water, and then it dries out real hard because there's no water going back into it, and so everything's drying up. Somebody decides to, maybe go out and start one, or maybe leave a campfire rolling in their
Right.
camp, left
Right.
hand in camp. There's a spark, and
Yeah.
there we go.
Can
It
be
just seems like
devastating.
California is fire central.
Yeah.
Anytime there's a wildfire, you pretty much figure it must be in California. You
Yeah.
make the news
Right.
every year with huge fires.
Yep.
But it's like you say, you get a good wet winter, and then you've got all this growth. You got a lot of vegetation, then it dries up all summer. And we're concerned about even Idaho at our place. We had a wildfire on our rangeland several years ago. And it's a little spark is all that it takes.
Right.
So we want good moisture to grow that vegetation for cover and forage, but at the same time, we don't want it to be fuel for a fire.
Right.
Totally.
We've done some good work with the U.S. Forest Service in California, doing forest mastification and clearing the forest floor. There is a video on our YouTube that kind of goes over the project we did and utilizing a company, Sierra Land Clearing, a California company. But it's so important and goes back to just educating people on what we do, because a lot of people probably wouldn't assume that the Mule Deer Foundation has anything to do with forest mastification or being a part of forest restoration. And that's just one of the many things we do to not only help mule deer, but another way people can get involved. So. Let's see here. So one question I have here is, why declines in one state matter to another? And I think this is interesting because things are so state specific. I mean, obviously there's crossover in a lot of ways, but things can be so specific. Even at the start of this podcast, it was like, oh, on my ranch and what I see, the numbers aren't, there's not devastating decline, but when you go out into the field or you go to other states, you see it different. So what are your thoughts on just why we should be looking at this collectively and not just on a state by state
Well,
basis?
as you said earlier, there's strength in numbers, for one thing. We need a political voice as well as hands on the ground to do habitat restoration and such. But overall, I think we've got to get the entire population to focus on the wilds. I think too many of us live in cities and suburbs, and we're not thinking about what's happening out in the country. Most people get out of town and they see an open field, whether it's all cheatgrass and Medusa head weeds, or if it's actually good habitat. They have no clue.
Right.
So they just think, well, there's no houses there, it must be wildlife habitat. So people don't understand, and how you get the education out so that they want to pay attention to it and care is really challenging if you're not a hunter or a birder or an outdoor enthusiast, where you're looking at that stuff and understanding it. And the average citizen is just not that. And I don't know how you get them there, but there's got to be some continuing education that actually grabs people's attention and pulls them in. And then you've got the job of actually educating them to the reality, not just the Walt Disney bunny fluffy,
Right.
isn't it all wonderful? The bluebirds are sitting on top of the head of the cougar, or whatever nonsense people think. It's hard. It's hard for them to buy into it because our culture has taught them year after year from age 1 on up. And it's just kind of a fluffy dream world for them.
Right.
So I don't know exactly what the answer is. I've been working at it for decades. Different organizations like Mule Deer Foundation and Rocky Mountain Elk and Ducks Unlimited and all the conservation groups, but we always seem to be grabbing the hunters,
Right.
but not the non-hunters, which are the bulk of the population.
Exactly.
There's a huge challenge there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We foundations and conservation groups are in a unique position to where we can work with a multiple of entities, whether it's agencies, private landowners. But even in the short time that I've been here, it has been primarily hunter focused, and so I really like that. I think that's a good thing to mention as far as going after those people that aren't so familiar, that aren't the hunters, because that is a majority of the population.
I 100% agree. I mean, I really can't say
Yeah.
much better. I mean, I think it's so important because we think that everybody that comes to a hunting and fishing show, they're a hunter or fisher. No, they just might enjoy being out on the landscape, and that's what we want. You know what I mean? I remember as a young kid growing up, going out with grandpa and dad, uncles, getting out into the field and just being part of it and spending that week with them and learning that core value. You know what I mean? When you take that initiative and just, people don't realize it's not about the kill.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's about going out and into the field. It's about the camaraderie. It's about learning. You know what I mean? What did I do wrong? What can I do better next year?
Right.
Some people really look into that. And then you got the road hunters that, like majority of California, they're all on the road.
Mhm.
They're driving the roads. But like I said, I think if we can educate,
Mhm.
we can inform, we can get the youth involved. I hope that's something that comes back for us here at the
Right,
Mule
like
Deer
R3 and
Yeah, R3, our Muley program. I really hope that that's something because we need to ensure the longevity.
right,
And like I said, getting those kids that maybe don't have the opportunity, we can do some of these smaller things and get them involved.
right.
And they might not have the opportunity, but if you got some young kid that wants to get involved, hey, I'll come pick you up.
Yeah.
We'll
You know,
go.
what I have noticed in recent years is that when you get folks on the ground and they have a personal investment in habitat improvement,
Mhm.
they feel like they've got ownership.
Yeah,
Yep.
It's like,
absolutely.
I planted a tree or a shrub. I worked on this project. And then they can, if they go past it or near it, they can tell their friends, hey, see that? I did that. They've got the hands on connection to the ground, to the earth, to the animals. And once they begin to understand, they're contributing to the
Right.
betterment, whether it's a big mule deer that arises out of it or it's just a mountain bluebird flitting off a branch, they've suddenly got a connection that they never had
Yeah,
before. So
absolutely.
programs like you have, we've got several of them in our mule deer local group. We'll get out on the ground and do a habitat project
Yeah.
like that. And if you can get a non-hunting kid out there to get his fingers in the dirt a little bit and start to understand that this is my world, I'm a part of it, I think that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think about just in myself, my love of the outdoors comes from my childhood being in the outdoors. And
Hmm.
so I think it's really important to create that connection to nature early because those are going to be the future leaders. And if they have that connection to nature and they have that connection to how important it is to keep things in balance and how important it is, to think of mule deer and all other of nature's critters can only benefit in the long run. So
Absolutely.
any last words before we're gonna close out? Anything you want to leave the audience with, whether it's about what you're doing now or just the topic in general?
You know, I just encourage folks, if they have any interest in mule deer, and I would assume most Mule Deer Foundation folks do, they wouldn't be listening or joining, but get your friends involved and really start to make it a focus in your life
Right.
and sharing it with others, because it's too easy to just think, well, this is the big wild west. It's always been wild and open. We've got elk and mule deer and pronghorn and all these wonderful creatures, and you don't pay enough attention to these insidious declines,
Right.
and they're really starting to accelerate. And of course, with ever increasing human population and folks moving in from all over and more houses going up, every time a house goes up, a deer falls down because there's habitat lost.
Hmm.
And people just don't seem to grasp that.
Yeah.
So if anyone out there can spread the word and say, listen, we're taking deer habitat away, that makes it quadruply more important that we enhance what we've still got left
Absolutely.
and protect it. Because if the 100 acres that turned into housing this year, next door is another 100 acres, and that turns into housing the next year, pretty soon there's no 100 acres left.
Right. Yeah. No, I love that point. And you know, it is true for all ungulates and elk. The elk numbers are out there. It is mule deer and development. All this affects all of those animals, but mule deer is one of the only big game western animals that is shrinking. I mean, we've seen recovery efforts really work for others like
Mhm.
elk and pronghorn and sheep. So we're hoping to do the same with mule deer. Frank, any closing thoughts on your half?
I just want to thank Ron and Ashley for being on the podcast today. It really was an enjoyment, to be able to talk about this and what we're seeing in our states. Just want to invite everybody out to your local banquet. If you don't know where your local banquet is, like Ashley said, go to muledeer.org, get involved, go to our events page, or use the map. Go ahead and click on your state. That's going to open up all the events. It's going to show us as regional directors. Feel free to reach out anytime.
Yep.
We are on the clock 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So our main thing is that we want our voice to be heard. And Ron, you brought up a great point. Tell a friend.
Yeah.
I challenge each and every person. When dinner comes, when they're at the banquet, I'm like, all right, folks. So I go over my spiel. I do my little talk. I don't talk too much because I want to kind of go over awards and stuff. But I hold up that card and I say, you know why this membership's so important? It's ensuring that you're part of our mission and you're staying involved. You're relating to what we're doing and you're getting involved. And like you said, they're taking that ownership. They're getting out on that project. And
Right.
that's what excites me. So I'm going to challenge everybody. Reach out to one person. Go to your local banquet. Talk to your local RD. Get a part of your local chapter, because at the end of the day, we need you. Our mission does not go forward without you. And at
Absolutely.
the end of the day, like I said, we're all doing this. And our motto at the Mule Deer Foundation that I love, that I always quote, is we're one team, one mission.
Hmm.
So let's join together. Let's go out, get out in the field, get our hands dirty, and let's make a difference where it counts.
I love that. Good way to end. And also, if you're not at an event, you can share this episode with a fellow friend, hunter or not. So, thank you guys. Appreciate your time. Thank you for your education and your knowledge. And this has been another episode of the Mule Deer Foundation podcast, and we will see you on another episode.